Hi everybody, are you ready for the music and sound chapter? It's chapter 4. This is one of my favorites. And this probably isn't a surprise to you because if you've been coming to class, you know that I always have music playing before class begins because I think it sets the tone for the day. And I can't even put my car in gear until there's a good song on. So I'm definitely an audiophile, which makes me really excited about this chapter. So the guy that started Pandora has a quote about music. Says it can emotionally and spiritually transport us through our memories, which is a very powerful part of who we are. Music contains our memory in a way. And so it's a force that makes us feel different things. And this is absolutely true for me, and I imagine it's true for some of you as well. You can hear a song and be immediately transported back to 8th grade. Or you hear a song and it reminds you of a very specific time in your life or a very specific person in your life, right? And I feel like music in many ways is like time travel. And it can certainly change my mood. And I imagine that some of you feel the same way. So I want to share a story. This morning I was listening to the Office Ladies podcast. It's a podcast that Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey do about their time on The Office. And this morning's episode was about the episode of The Office where Pam breaks down about Jim and Karen. Anyway, she was talking about how when the camera already started rolling, she had to be sobbing. And that's really hard for an actor. Instead of just building it up, she had to be crying the minute the cameras were rolling. So what did she do? How did she get there? She listened to music. She listened to sad music that reminded her of certain things. So on her Instagram post this morning, she says that the song that really got her to cry was this Ben Folds song called The Luckiest. I have not listened to it because I don't want to cry today. But this is a terrific example of how music can change our emotions. And that's why we need to study it, because music is used in all forms of media specifically to influence our emotions. Think about movies, think about television programs, think about political commercials, okay? Music is used in all these ways because it is such a powerful tool. So here's what the music industry used to be. It was just sheet music. That's how you used to sell music, and that's how you used to buy music, on pieces of dead tree. So then let's move to Thomas Edison. And pretty much any time in this class when I ask, who invented X? If you guess Thomas Edison, in many cases you are going to be correct. So he made a recording device that played back voices, and he called it the phonograph because phono means far off and graph means sound, okay? Now, this is the way people used to listen to music together. It's one of the ways, at least. I love this photo so much because think of how it has changed for us. You know, now we have AirPods or Bluetooth headphones and we can do it individually, independently. It's a very intimate experience, at least for me, when I'm listening to music on headphones because no one else can hear. And here they're having a shared experience, which doesn't typically happen when we're listening to music unless we're at a concert. So let's move up to Emile Berliner. Now we're in the late 1800s. He actually recorded sounds onto metal discs. Okay, and he invented the thing that could play the disc. So it looks very much like a music box used to be, right? But these flat metal discs were considered master recordings. And of course, that's the precursor to the vinyl record, which came later. Now, the flat disc was fine until audio tape was developed by the Germans in 1940. So this is an audio tape player. And if you've seen an 8-track tape or a cassette tape, you're very familiar with what that brown tape looks like. It looks like thin brown Scotch tape that's just not sticky. Which brings us to the 8-track, which is on the left, and cassettes, which is on the right. Now, 8-tracks, I don't know why they were called 8-tracks because they didn't really have 8 tracks, they had 4. So each track had maybe 3 or 4 songs on it. Now remember, we did not buy individual songs then. If you had a song that you wanted to hear that you liked, you basically had to buy the whole album either on vinyl and 8-track in the 70s or vinyl and cassette in the 80s. And then, of course, early 90s, then compact disc came along. So if there was a song that you wanted to hear that was the third song on track 4, you could press to get to the 8-track of track 4, but then you had to sit through songs 1 and 2. And it was the very same with cassettes. You know, now, and I realize that I'm starting to sound like my mom. You all are so lucky. But think about it. If you have a song that you want to hear, a song that you are really into, how many buttons do you have to press before you can hear it immediately? 1, 2, right? You can hear it immediately. Whereas when I wanted to hear, perhaps, Island Girl by Elton John in 1978, I had to call the radio station and be on hold and then request it. Okay, just let that sink in and be filled with pity. Cassettes weren't really that much better than the 8-track because you still had to fast forward through songs to get to the song you wanted. Now, big improvement came when the cassette player would automatically stop in between songs. Okay, this is exciting stuff, you guys. And in class, I will explain to you why a mixtape is indeed the most meaningful, lovely gift that you can give anyone. All right, so this brings me to the Sony Walkman. Revolutionary because you could choose your music and it was portable. So now we're making music less of a community thing and more of an individual, independent, intimate thing. The Sony Walkman, oh my gosh, the headphones were so gross because they were foamy, like they had little sponges on them, and they would get all sweaty. But you didn't care because the Walkman was the coolest thing ever, except it used a crazy amount of batteries. Like this model, this isn't the model that I had. I had a different one, but mine used 4 AA's, and it would go through batteries really quickly. Then in the late 80s came the sports Walkman. This one was waterproof. And if you notice, yeah, I'm geeking out, but this is my jam. Okay. If you notice, the sponge is off the headphones here. The headphones look a little more modern. But this one also had a radio attached. So now we're moving into digital recordings where music is played back by a laser rather than a needle or the magnetic tape. And CDs came on the market in 1983. The quality of a CD was 100 times better than a tape because if you played a cassette tape too long, you could hear it. It got to be kind of scratchy. And of course, you know, if CDs and records, vinyl records got scratched, they were damaged. But the quality of a CD was outstanding. And I can tell you the first time I heard music on a CD, it was markedly different. Now, in the 1990s, music became digital. So for the first time, you could email a song to somebody or share or like post it online. So you've probably heard of Napster. Napster was a file sharing website. It did not send songs to anybody. It was just the repository where people could upload these MP3, these digital files, and then other people could download them and then burn them on a CD. So suddenly the consumer had power. You could create a playlist on Yahoo Music or whatever and burn a CD in 5 minutes. Now, the record industry, of course, didn't like this at all because they weren't getting a cut of any of this. So they sued Napster and went after Napster and anybody who was using Napster. Like there were some people that were arrested, but it was like people who had like 80,000 songs in their library or something. The record industry went after Napster when what they should have done is create a marketplace online like Apple did, because iTunes was the leader for years before streaming got to be so big. So while the record companies were fighting Napster, Apple creates this online marketplace and they eventually control music distribution in the United States. If the record companies had been smart, they would have created their own online marketplaces, but they were too busy being mad at Napster. Which brings me back to microcasting. Remember, every single chapter is going to involve either broadcasting, narrowcasting, or microcasting. And this is a great example of microcasting because when you get on Pandora or Spotify or Apple Music, your suggestions or your playlists don't look like anybody else's in the world, right? So the suggestions that Apple Music gives me every Friday are completely different than what they give everybody else because it's based on what I listen to the most. I feel like they know me. And that is the greatest example of microcasting, is when you feel like this company who's trying to sell you stuff knows you. And think of it. Does anybody in the world have the exact same Spotify list that you do? Of course not. Of course not. And that's what's so cool about it. All right, so what happened to iTunes? Well, iTunes used to be a site where you would buy songs. They were usually $1.29, and then you could download them and burn them onto CDs or whatever, okay, or put them on an MP3 player. But Apple saw the writing on the wall and saw that streaming was really the future. So now it's Apple Music. So if you have a subscription to Apple Music, you don't really own the songs. You're kind of just renting them while you listen. But I'm a fan. I'm a fan. Okay, so how has the communication model changed? Now, do you remember the very first chapter 1, we talked about the communication model. We talked about the sender and the receiver and feedback and noise. Well, think about Pandora, for example. Who's the sender of the message? Well, it's Pandora. Or is Pandora the medium? Who's choosing the message? It's actually you, right? So maybe you're the sender. Pandora is the medium, but then you're also the receiver. And how quickly can you give feedback? It's immediate. How great is that, right? So has streaming changed this? It's changed the model, yes. Has it changed the money? Oh yeah, let me show you. So this is how much, and this is from your book, this is how much an artist will make for 1,000 streams on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you notice, the numbers on the right are not huge. For 1,000 streams on YouTube, the artist gets $1, okay? It has changed the whole economic structure of it. Think of how many streams you'd have to make a lot of money as a musician. Whew. So essentially, 1,500 song streams equals the money of what one album sale used to be. And 150 song streams equals the money that one song sale used to be. So it almost seems like the artists have to work harder and sell more to earn the money that they would have made 20 years ago. Now, this is also from your book, and this was from when iTunes was still operating. But if you look, if you buy like an $18 CD at Best Buy or whatever, the music label gets almost half of that. The retailer gets a huge chunk of it. The artist and the songwriter get little chunks. And on a $1.29 digital download, the label still gets a huge chunk. Apple still gets a huge chunk. And the artist and the songwriter aren't getting as much. Food for thought. Okay, so who streams the most music? YouTube. YouTube streams more music than Apple, Spotify, and Pandora combined. And yet, what did we learn about how much money you make on YouTube? Not very much. Which brings me to a band called OK Go. If you're not familiar with them, check out their videos. They're amazing. They're really super creative guys. So they wanted to include the option for their fans to embed their videos on their fans' own personal websites. So if I was an OK Go fan, they would want it to be okay for me to take the video off YouTube and embed it into my site. Well, their record company said, because if you go to my personal website and play and press play on an OK Go video that I've embedded, the record company doesn't get any money. So they were involved in a really long legal battle because OK Go wanted their fans to be able to embed the videos on their websites, but the record company didn't want them to. So it's a really interesting case about streaming, about money, about intellectual property, you name it. So there's some issues facing the industry. These are from your book. Homogenization, which means everything's starting to sound the same. Questionable song lyrics, people have been worried about that for years. The idea of selling out, which we'll talk about in class. But I think there are different issues facing the music industry that your book does not mention. The death of the album. Very rarely do we download an entire album anymore. I've only done that twice in the last 2 years. The idea of music being a product or a service. And if it is a service, is it something that we just pay for monthly? The democratization of discovery. That means that record agents used to go to clubs and see bands play and then offer them contracts if they thought they were really good. Well, now artists are being discovered on YouTube. Wasn't Justin Bieber discovered on MySpace or something like that? I can't remember. My favorite band really got started on YouTube, and now there can be like a groundswell that helps get a band popular, not necessarily a record company promoting them. I think that eventually our music streaming is going to get taxed because the government loves to tax us. And I think that we need to talk more about Apple's online dominance in the music industry. If you can't work with Apple, your music's probably not going to get out there. And then record companies made money selling records and bands made money playing live. Well, in 2020, neither one of those things are happening. Okay. So let me show you the top 10 global tours of last year. But this year, in 2020, there's really, because this ranking for 2020 tours stopped March 7th. Because after that, like the second or third week of March is when everything started to go to hell. So there were no tours or no concerts after that. But if you look at this, the Grateful Dead, Eagles, and Aerosmith, those are old bands full of old people. So there has to be some new artists that kind of move into that, that realm once the pandemic is over. All right, these are terms you absolutely need to know for the music chapter. Piracy, counterfeiting, bootlegging. We're all basically guilty of at least 2 of these. Piracy is the uploading or downloading of any copyrighted material. So if you have a friend send you a song that you did not pay for, that's piracy, okay? Because you're violating copyright. Counterfeiting is the unauthorized copying of material. So like when I used to burn CDs, 15 years ago, that was counterfeiting, okay? Because I was copying songs onto CDs. Now bootlegging is when you sneak a phone into a concert, or a movie for that matter, and you film it and then you upload it or sell it. That's bootlegging. Those are unauthorized copies of live performances. And in fact, I've been to a couple concerts lately in the last few years where the artist will call out people in the audience if they're filming. It's kind of awkward. Anyway, these are 3 terms you definitely need to know. If something is in the public domain, that means that it's no longer under copyright restrictions. So here, it's work published in the US in 1922 or earlier, or anything after 1978, it's the last surviving member plus 70 years. So it'll be a very big deal when all of Michael Jackson's music goes into public domain, very big deal when all the entire Beatles catalog goes into public domain. But really this year, which is exciting, Rhapsody in Blue has now entered the public domain, which I think is one of the most fabulous pieces of music ever written and performed. If you're not familiar, look it up. Maybe this is what I'll play in class. So this is the music chapter, and we will be moving on to radio next. So I'll see you guys in class.